There are seasons in life when the heart becomes a battlefield no one else can see. You smile when you're supposed to. You speak when required, and you move through your days as if nothing is wrong. But deep down there is an ache that words cannot describe, a silent hurt that has lingered for years. You've prayed in whispers, hoping heaven was listening. You've forgiven people who never said sorry. You've carried burdens that were never yours to bear, and through it all you wondered if God had forgotten your pain. But what if your silence was sacred to him? What if those nights you wept quietly were not ignored, but recorded? Every tear that fell unnoticed by others was counted by God. He saw what broke you, even when you couldn't speak about it. He heard the cries that never left your lips, and now something divine is stirring. The one who allowed the breaking is now preparing the mending. God is about to restore your heart, not just to what it was, but to what it was always meant to be. Whole, peaceful, unshaken by the wounds of yesterday. You see, pain has a strange way of purifying love. It removes the shallow, burns away the false, and leaves only what is genuine. The heartbreak you carried for years wasn't wasted. It taught you to see people differently, to love deeply but wisely. It made you gentle with the wounded and patient with the broken, and in all that quiet endurance, God was shaping a heart that mirrors his own. That's why restoration doesn't come quickly. It comes when you're ready to value it. God never rushes healing. He rebuilds the heart piece by piece, layer by layer. There are days it feels as though nothing is changing, but he is working behind the stillness. You may not see the shift, but heaven is aligning moments, people, and places for your renewal. You've been through the wilderness long enough. Now the dew of restoration is about to fall upon your soul. Where there was numbness, there will be tenderness. Numbness, where there was fear, there will be faith. Where there was emptiness, love will flow again. Not borrowed love, not broken love, but divine love. Many people never knew the depth of your hurt because you never wanted pity. You carried yourself with quiet dignity, even when you were crumbling inside. You didn't broadcast your pain, you prayed through it. And that, my friend, is why heaven is honoring you. God restores the hearts of those who suffer in silence, because silence in suffering is faith in disguise. You trusted his timing when nothing made sense. You didn't curse him when you were wounded. You held on. And now, the one who saw your loyalty in the dark is preparing to reward you in the light. Sometimes restoration begins not with joy, but with peace. The kind of peace that makes you stop searching for explanations and simply rest in the truth that God knows what he's doing. That's when the heart starts to heal. Not because everything is fixed, but because you finally realize you're safe. You no longer need to control what broke you or chase what left you. The pain that once made you bitter now makes you wise. The silence that once felt like punishment is revealed to be protection, and the loneliness that once haunted you becomes the very place where God's presence feels the most real. Don't be surprised when God starts to bring beauty out of the ashes you thought were permanent. You'll begin to meet people who see your worth without being told. You'll find yourself laughing again at moments that used to hurt. Your heart will start to open, not in fear of being wounded again, but in quiet confidence that you are held by someone who never lets go. The memories that once pierced you will lose their sting. You'll still remember, but the pain will no longer define you. What's coming is not a return to your old self, but the revelation of your new one, the one that walked through the fire and came out refined. The one that learned to depend on God when everyone else disappeared. The one that knows peace is not found in people's approval, but in divine assurance. Your heart will love again, but this time from wisdom, not desperation. This time it won't be seeking to be completed, it will be giving from completion. And when that restoration comes, you'll look back at the years of silent hurt and realize they were not wasted years. They were sacred years, the years that prepared you for the blessing ahead, the years that deepened your empathy, strengthened your spirit, and drew you closer to God. You'll understand why it had to be silent, why no one could fix it, and why healing took so long. Because God was not only restoring your heart, He was teaching it how to beat in harmony with Him. So if your heart still aches, hold on. Restoration is already on its way. You may not feel it yet, but the heavens are shifting. God has been rewriting your story in the background, preparing a chapter filled with laughter where there used to be tears, love where there used to be loss, and peace where there used to be pain. The silent hurt is ending. The divine restoration has begun. There are moments in life when your pain becomes invisible to everyone but God. You walk through days that seem normal on the outside, but deep within you are breaking. People see your smile, they hear your laughter, but they do not see the heaviness that presses against your chest when the world grows quiet. You've learned to cry without sound, to grieve without witnesses, to pray without words. The world often overlooks those who suffer in silence, but heaven never does. God has seen every hidden tear, every suppressed emotion, every time you held your breath to keep from falling apart. There is something sacred about silent pain. It's not loud enough to attract sympathy, yet it's deep enough to draw the attention of the divine. God watches the moments when you lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand why certain people hurt you, why certain seasons felt so unfair. You may think your cries went unheard, but they echoed through eternity. Every time you whispered, "Help me," God leaned in closer. He didn't ignore your silence, He interpreted it. Because silence has a language, and the one who created your soul understands it perfectly. When your friends stopped checking in, God never left your side. When you felt invisible to the world, you were fully seen by the one who shaped it. You may not have realized it then, but your quiet endurance became your most powerful prayer. It was in those moments of unseen pain that your faith was being refined, not through shouting or preaching, but through persistence. You kept waking up, you kept showing up, and that alone was worship. Heaven takes note of that kind of strength. Sometimes when you think God is being silent, He's actually watching closely. He allows certain seasons of loneliness not because He delights in your suffering, but because He wants you to experience His presence without distractions. When everyone else's voice fades, His voice becomes clearer. You begin to feel a peace that doesn't make sense, a quiet reassurance that whispers, "I am here." That's how He comforts those who suffer quietly, not through thunder or lightning, but through a still, small voice that reaches the depths of your soul. God's awareness of your pain is not passive, it is active. He is not a distant observer, but an intimate participant. He walks with you through the corridors of your sorrow, carrying the weight that would have otherwise crushed you. Every sleepless night you endured, every unanswered question, every tear you wiped away in secret, He was there. There was never a single moment when you were alone. His compassion does not depend on your ability to speak about your pain. It depends on His love for you, which never wavers. You see, when you suffer silently, it's easy to assume God's quietness means absence. But silence can also be the language of preparation. God's delay in speaking doesn't mean He hasn't heard. It means He's still writing the answer. Sometimes His plan requires your stillness, so He can perform the delicate work of healing your heart without interruption. If He spoke too soon, you might cling to His words instead of His presence. So He waits, letting your soul learn to trust without proof, to believe without signs. And when the time is right, he reveals that he had been holding your broken pieces all along, ready to restore them into something stronger than before. There are people who never understood the depth of your struggle because you carried it gracefully. You didn't collapse in front of them. You endured in silence. But know this: your restraint was not in vain. God saw the strength it took to stay kind while being hurt. He saw the courage it took to forgive when you were still bleeding. He saw your patience when others dismissed your pain. And he will honor that. Heaven always honors silent endurance. The beauty of God's awareness is that he doesn't just see your pain, he also sees what you don't. He sees who betrayed you, who misunderstood you, who used your kindness as weakness. But rather than exposing them immediately, he protects you by pulling you away, by allowing distance that you didn't understand at first. Every unanswered message, every door that closed, every person who walked away was part of his mercy. Because when you are deeply hurt, he knows that healing requires separation from noise, from chaos, from those who caused the wound. That's why he keeps you hidden until your heart is whole again. So when you look back and remember those seasons of silent pain, don't see them as wasted years. See them as holy years. They were the times when God's eyes never left you. They were the seasons when his angels stood guard around your fragile heart. Every tear you shed became a seed, and those seeds will grow into blessings you never expected. The same God who watched you cry will one day make you smile again. The same God who saw your pain will soon show you why it was necessary. He never missed a moment of your struggle, not one. And that's why your healing will be personal, profound, and perfect in its timing. Because the God who saw your silent pain is the same God who will one day turn that silence into a testimony, a story that will touch others who are now hurting quietly, just as you once did. There are moments when pain feels meaningless, when you wonder why God would let your heart ache for so long without relief. You look back at everything you've endured and ask yourself, what was the point of all this? But what if the pain had a purpose deeper than you ever imagined? What if every heartbreak, every disappointment, and every silent tear was shaping something eternal within you? Pain, when placed in the hands of God, is never wasted. It becomes a tool of transformation, a fire that purifies, a storm that strengthens, a night that prepares you to appreciate the sunrise. When you were hurting, you may not have realized it, but God was using that pain to mold your character. He was carving away the excess, the pride, the illusions, and the dependence on things or people that could not sustain you. Through suffering, he taught you what no comfort could. You learned patience in waiting, compassion in breaking, and humility in falling. You learned how fragile human promises are, and how unshakable his word is. That pain became your teacher, one that spoke in silence but changed everything about you. Sometimes, the pain we experience is God's way of redirecting us. We get attached to what feels good, even when it's not good for us. We stay where we're not growing. We hold on to relationships that are draining our spirit, and we settle for less because we fear losing more. So God allows discomfort to move us. He allows hearts to break, so that we stop worshipping people who were never meant to be our source of peace. He allows rejection so that we stop building our worth on other people's approval. It hurts deeply, but it's a holy kind of hurt, one that pushes us back toward the arms of the one who never fails. Every wound you've suffered carried a lesson. Some pain was meant to open your eyes, others to strengthen your spirit. The betrayal you endured taught you discernment. The loss you faced taught you gratitude. Even the moments that felt like punishment were, in truth, divine preparation. God was not trying to destroy you. He was removing what couldn't go with you to the next season. You were being pruned, not punished. And though pruning hurts, it's the only way to make room for new growth. The pain you carried also purified your love. It stripped away the superficial kind, the kind that depends on being loved back, and revealed the kind that endures even when it isn't returned. You learned to love without needing validation. You learned that kindness doesn't make you weak, and forgiveness doesn't make you foolish. The trials you faced taught you the difference between being soft-hearted and being naive. They shaped you into someone who now understands what true strength looks like. It's not in fighting back, but in staying gentle when the world hardens you. There is something sacred about a heart that has been broken and still chooses to love. Pain teaches you empathy. It teaches you to recognize the silent suffering in others because you've walked through it yourself. When you see someone hurting, you don't just offer words, you offer understanding. You know what it's like to smile through tears, to hold yourself together when no one else can. That compassion is the fruit of your suffering. Without the pain, you wouldn't carry the same depth, the same spiritual maturity, or the same sensitivity to the struggles of others. And while pain refines your heart, it also refines your faith. When everything is easy, faith is shallow, but when life breaks you, faith becomes real. You learn to trust without proof, to believe when everything around you screams doubt. That's when faith stops being theory and becomes experience. The pain forced you to lean on God in ways you never would have if life had stayed comfortable. You discovered that His strength is made perfect in your weakness. You realized that He was never far, even when you couldn't feel Him. Pain also teaches you perspective. What once seemed unbearable becomes a chapter you can now look back on with gratitude. You start to see how it all fits together, the people who left, the doors that closed, the tears that fell. Each moment had a role in preparing you for the blessings you now have, or the ones still on their way. The pain taught you not to take peace for granted, not to measure joy by circumstances, and not to depend on anyone else for your healing. So when you look back on the years of silent hurt, see them differently. See them as the years when God was chiseling you into something unbreakable. Every hardship was a lesson in disguise. Every heartbreak was a seed of wisdom planted in your soul. You may not have understood it then, but God was sculpting your destiny through your pain. He was using what wounded you to reveal what's divine within you. Your pain wasn't meaningless. It was making you into the person your purpose requires. You had to lose to learn. You had to be emptied to be filled. You had to be broken to be blessed. That's the mystery of divine transformation. What feels like ruin in one season becomes revelation in the next. And when you finally step into the life God has prepared for you, you'll realize that nothing you went through was wasted. Every tear had a purpose. Every silence had meaning. Every ache was part of the making of you. Healing doesn't always come in the way we expect it to. We live in a world that glorifies speed, where everything must happen now. Answers, success, closure, peace. But God's healing doesn't follow a calendar. He doesn't rush the process because He knows that deep restoration cannot be microwaved. It must be nurtured, layer by layer, season by season. Sometimes the silence of heaven is not neglect, it's precision. God is rebuilding your heart, not in haste but with holy care. Each moment of waiting, each prayer that feels unanswered, each quiet day where nothing seems to change, those are all brushstrokes in the masterpiece of your healing. Imagine a craftsman restoring an ancient instrument. He doesn't force the pieces together or rush the polish. He studies every crack, every detail, every wound the years have left behind. That is how God works with the human heart. He is not in a hurry to make you look healed. He wants you to be healed. True healing is not cosmetic, it's internal. It's not about appearing fine to others, it's about being at peace within yourself. So he takes his time. He allows you to sit with your pain, not to torture you, but to teach you. Because healing without understanding is temporary, but healing with wisdom is eternal. You may not see what God is doing, but that doesn't mean he's doing nothing. Healing often happens in the unseen. The roots of your soul are being watered while you think you're forgotten. When a seed is planted, it disappears underground before it ever grows upward. The same happens with your restoration. Before you bloom again, you must first take root in faith. You must learn to trust God's invisible hand more than your visible circumstances. That's where real growth begins. Beneath the surface, where only heaven can see. There were days you felt like nothing was improving. You prayed and still woke up with the same heaviness. You forgave and still felt the ache. You worshipped, but the wound was still tender. And yet, slowly, something within you was shifting. You began to handle pain differently. You began to see that your worth wasn't lost just because you were broken. You started recognizing that peace doesn't mean the absence of pain. It means the presence of God in the midst of it. It means the presence of God in the midst of it. That quiet transformation was God's way of showing you that he hadn't abandoned you. He was renewing you. Every delay has a divine reason. God doesn't withhold healing to punish you. He delays it to deepen it. If he healed you instantly, you might never understand the depth of his mercy. You might think you did it on your own strength, but when he takes his time, you learn endurance, gratitude, and dependence on his grace. You begin to appreciate the process rather than resenting it. You start to see that sometimes the waiting itself is the healing, because it's in waiting that your faith grows, your patience expands, and your heart matures. And while you're waiting, he's working. He's orchestrating moments you can't yet see. He's sending the right people to cross your path at the right time. He's softening hearts, aligning opportunities, and clearing out the clutter that once clouded your spirit. You may not notice the change until one day you wake up and realize that the pain that used to paralyze you no longer controls you. The memories that once triggered tears now bring wisdom. The heaviness that weighed on your chest feels lighter. That's how divine healing works. It arrives quietly, almost unnoticed, until suddenly you realize the wound no longer defines you. Hence, this is the greatest wound of all. God heals in layers because wounds are layered. Some scars are physical, others emotional, and some spiritual. He knows which part of you needs attention first. Sometimes he starts by healing your mind, teaching you to release the thoughts that keep reopening old wounds. Other times he begins with your heart, restoring your ability to trust, to hope, to love again. And sometimes he begins with your spirit, reminding you that your worth was never lost, even when you were shattered. Each step of that process is sacred, even when it's slow. When healing feels delayed, it's easy to grow frustrated. You might ask, why can't I just move on? But what you don't see is that God is protecting you from superficial healing, the kind that fades when life tests you again. He's making sure that when you rise for good. When he restores you, it won't be partial or fragile. You won't have to fake peace, you'll be peace. You won't have to pretend to be strong, you'll become strength itself. Because the same God who allowed the breaking is also the one who ensures that your restoration can never be undone. There's a quiet beauty in divine timing. When God finally reveals what he's been doing all along, it humbles you. You begin to see that every tear watered your growth. Every delay saved you from disaster, and every heartbreak redirected you toward purpose. You realized that healing wasn't just about feeling better, it was about becoming better. It was about discovering the kind of strength that can only be born through pain and patience. So if you're still waiting for your heart to fully heal, don't lose hope. You're not behind. You're being prepared. Healing that comes from God doesn't just mend, it transforms. He's restoring not only what was broken, but also what was lost within you. Your peace, your innocence, your faith, your joy. Trust the process, even when it's slow, because divine healing is never late. It always arrives right on time, carrying the peace you once prayed for, the strength you once lacked, and the love you always deserved. There are few things more powerful than faith that keeps quiet. When everything inside you wants to scream, "Why, God? Why me?" And yet you stay silent, trusting that He knows what He's doing, that is faith in its purest form. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was worship. Every time you held back tears in front of those who hurt you and whispered, "God will handle it," you were showing heaven that you trusted more in His justice than in your own ability to fight back. Every moment you chose peace instead of revenge, you were proving that you believed in divine timing. God sees that kind of faith. It's not the loud kind that shouts in church or posts verses online. It's the quiet kind that happens in the dark, when no one's watching, when your heart is breaking and you still say, "I'll wait for you." That is the faith that moves heaven. That is the kind of faith that angels admire and the enemy fears. Because silent faith is not passive, it's powerful. It tells God, "I don't understand what you're doing, but I know who you are." You may have felt invisible during your seasons of pain, but heaven was watching your endurance like a sacred offering. God saw you when you prayed for people who wronged you. He saw you when you forgave them before they ever asked. He saw you blessing others while you yourself were empty, and in those moments your faith became a fragrance that rose before His throne. Every act of quiet trust was like a seed sown in unseen soil. And now, those seeds are about to bloom. The harvest is coming, not of material things, but of peace, clarity, and restoration. Sometimes, faith isn't about believing for miracles, it's about believing through misery. It's about standing still when everything around you is falling apart. It's choosing to say, "Even if nothing changes today, I still know that God is good." That's the kind of faith that rewrites your destiny. Because while everyone else runs to fix what's broken, you wait for God to rebuild it His way. While others chase closure, you rest in trust. While others rely on explanations, you cling to His character. That quiet confidence is the evidence of maturity, a sign that you've grown from needing proof to living by faith. Your silence during pain was not wasted, it was sacred. God heard what you didn't say. He understood the words behind your sighs, the meaning in your tears. You may not have had the strength to explain your struggle, but He never required you to. He only asked you to trust, and you did. You trusted Him when you couldn't see the outcome. You trusted Him when people mocked you for waiting. You trusted Him when your circumstances made no sense. That kind of loyalty moves heaven more than 1,000 loud prayers, because trust born in suffering is trust that cannot be shaken. There are many who pray for blessings, but few who have the patience to wait for God's way of giving them. You, however, waited. You didn't settle for temporary comfort. You didn't rush into the arms of what was convenient. You stayed still, even when the stillness hurt. You let time do its work, and in doing so, you allowed God to finish what He started. You may not have seen immediate results, but you became stronger in the waiting. Your patience became your protection, and your silence became your strength. Every moment of your quiet faith has been building something invisible inside you. God was using your waiting to deepen your roots, because when the storm comes, it's the tree with the deepest roots that survives. You've been through enough rain, enough wind, enough shaking to stand firm now. That's why your next season will not break you. It will reveal you. God allowed the storm to prove that your faith was not built on emotions, but on endurance. And here's the mystery of faith. Heaven responds to stillness. When you stop panicking and start trusting, you create space for miracles. While fear shouts, faith listens. And in the quietness of your trust, God begins to act. The situations that seemed frozen start to move. The hearts that seemed closed begin to soften. The opportunities that felt lost begin to reappear. Because heaven doesn't rush, but it never forgets. You see, the faith that moved heaven wasn't loud, it was loyal. It wasn't dramatic, it was devoted. You didn't need to prove anything, you just needed to stay still. And you did. Every tear became evidence of your endurance. Every unanswered prayer became a testament to your trust. You stood in silence while others spoke against you, and heaven wrote your name among the faithful. Now that faith is about to be rewarded. What was once quiet endurance will soon become visible restoration. God will honor you publicly for the battles you fought privately. The same people who wondered how you kept standing will see that it was God who held you up all along. The very faith that looked foolish to the world is the faith that drew favor from heaven. You didn't have to shout for God to hear you. You didn't have to fight for Him to defend you. You only had to believe, and you did. So now, watch how He responds. Watch how the same silence that once felt heavy becomes the atmosphere of blessing. Watch how every whispered prayer becomes a resounding answer. Because heaven always moves when faith stays still. And your stillness, your patience, your quiet trust, it all moves the heart of God. Peace rarely comes with fanfare. It doesn't arrive with trumpets or grand gestures. It slips in quietly, often when you least expect it. After years of holding on to pain, waiting for closure, and searching for answers, one day you simply wake up and realize you're not angry anymore. The weight that once felt unbearable is somehow lighter. The memories that once triggered tears now bring understanding. That is the moment God begins His greatest work, the restoration of peace before the return of joy. You see, many expect healing to look like happiness, but it rarely starts that way. Joy is the fruit, but peace is the soil. Without peace, joy cannot grow. God knows this, and that's why His first gift to a weary soul is not excitement, not breakthrough, but stillness. Before you dance again, He teaches you how to rest. Before He restores what was lost, He calms the storm inside you. That peace you begin to feel, the one that doesn't make sense, is the evidence that God is near. It's the quiet whisper after the storm, the gentle reminder that your heart is safe now. There's something divine about the moment peace enters a place where chaos once ruled. For so long your thoughts raced in circles, replaying conversations, analyzing pain, wondering what you could have done differently. You prayed for answers, for justice, for closure. But God doesn't always send explanations. He sends peace. And when peace comes, explanations no longer matter. Because peace is not the absence of problems. It's the presence of trust. It's knowing that even if you don't understand the why, you are still held by the one who does. Peace doesn't demand conditions. It demands surrender. It begins when you stop fighting what you can't change and start trusting what God can. When you stop asking, "Why did they hurt me?" and start saying, God, heal me anyway. When you stop replaying what broke you and start resting in what's being rebuilt, that's when you realize peace was never lost. It was simply buried beneath your need to control. And once you let go, once you give it all back to God, peace rises like dawn after the darkest night. That first deep breath after long grief, that moment when you stop looking over your shoulder waiting for more pain, that's not weakness. That's peace becoming strength. It's the soft voice inside that tells you you don't have to fight anymore. It's the holy hush that follows years of noise. When you reach that point, you're not the same person who entered the storm. You've learned to find calm not because the waves stopped, but because you've discovered the one who walks on water. God knows that joy without peace is fragile. That's why he rebuilds you from the inside out. Before he gives you new blessings, he gives you balance. Before he restores relationships, he restores your rhythm. Before he opens doors, he strengthens your foundation. He makes sure that the peace he gives you can't be shaken by what others do or don't do. It's the kind of peace that doesn't depend on apology, closure, or validation. It's built on something eternal. The quiet confidence that God is still in control. The peace he gives you is not ordinary, it's protective. It guards your mind when doubt tries to creep in. It shields your heart when memories try to haunt you. It reminds you that you survived what was meant to destroy you, and you didn't just survive. You grew. You're wiser now. You're softer, but stronger, and that's what divine peace does. It doesn't erase your past, it redeems it. It transforms the places of pain into places of power. When God restores peace to a heart that's been through war, he doesn't just patch it up. He rebuilds it. You begin to move differently, speak differently, even think differently. You no longer seek chaos disguised as love. You no longer chase people who disturb your peace. You start protecting your spirit, setting boundaries, saying no when necessary. You realize that peace isn't something you wait for. It's something you choose every day, in alignment with God's presence. There's a reason the storms lasted as long as they did. You had to learn that peace is not found in other people's behavior. It's found in your surrender to God's plan. The moment you stopped seeking revenge, stopped trying to prove your worth, stopped begging others to understand you, that's when peace entered. Because peace comes to the humble, not the proud. It visits those who say, God, I trust you more than I trust my emotions. And when peace settles in, it changes everything. Your words become softer. Your sleep becomes deeper. Your laughter becomes freer. You no longer live waiting for the next hurt. You live expecting the next blessing. You stop fearing what could go wrong because your heart finally believes that God makes all things right. The same heart that once bled in silence now beats with stillness. That's divine peace, the kind that doesn't make sense to others but makes perfect sense to heaven. So when you feel that quiet stillness after all your chaos, don't question it. That's God's sign that healing has begun. Peace always arrives before joy, because peace prepares the ground for joy to take root. The laughter will come, the lightness will return, but for now, rest in the calm, because this peace, the one that makes no logical sense, is proof that God's hand is restoring your heart. You don't have to chase happiness anymore. You just have to protect this peace, because from it everything beautiful will grow. There comes a time in every broken heart's journey when God begins to fill the empty spaces, not with people, not with promises, but with his love. For years you may have tried to find healing in the same places that hurt you. You looked for peace in human affection, validation in approval, and comfort in temporary arms. But none of it lasted, none of it filled the quiet ache that lingered long after the world went to sleep. That's because no human love, no matter how sincere, can fill the places designed for divine love. When God begins his restoration, he replaces emptiness not with distraction, but with himself. Divine love doesn't rush to erase the past. It redeems it. It looks at the parts of your story you're ashamed of and says, even this has value. It doesn't ignore your scars. It honors them as proof that you've survived. When God begins to fill your heart, he doesn't pretend you were never wounded. He simply makes the wound lose its power. The love he gives is gentle, patient, and complete. It doesn't demand explanations or performances. It doesn't demand explanations it doesn't fade when you fail. It stays, it heals, and it teaches you that being loved by God means being accepted fully, mess and all. You may have spent years loving others from a place of emptiness, giving, serving, forgiving, hoping that someone would see your worth and love you in return. But human love, when not rooted in God, often disappoints. People can admire your strength, yet misunderstand your heart. They can take your kindness and return indifference. But God's love is the opposite. It reaches into your emptiness and calls you worthy before anyone else does. It whispers, "You are mine, not because of what you've done, but because of who you are." And when that truth finally sinks in, the void begins to close. There is a shift that happens when divine love enters. You stop begging for crumbs from tables that were never meant for you. You stop chasing people who can't match your depth. You stop mistaking attachment for connection. The love that God gives teaches you discernment. It opens your eyes to see that not all love heals, and not all closeness is safe. Some things must leave so better things can come. The emptiness you once cursed was actually the space God cleared to pour himself in. The loneliness you resented was the silence where his voice could finally be heard. Divine love doesn't always feel like fireworks. Sometimes it feels like peace. It doesn't always come with excitement. Sometimes it comes with clarity. You begin to see that what you once thought was love was often fear. Fear of being alone, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. God's love removes that fear. It tells you that you were never abandoned, only hidden. You were never unworthy, only being refined. When his love fills your heart, you stop clinging to what broke you and start trusting what's rebuilding you. God's love is not fragile like human affection. It doesn't change with mood or circumstance. When people withdraw, he remains. When you fail, he forgives. When you wonder, he waits. His love is steady, and it fills you until you overflow. You start to notice the difference. It's in the way you think, speak, and live. You no longer seek validation in the eyes of others. You seek alignment with his will. You no longer crave attention. You crave peace. That's how divine love transforms you. It shifts your focus from needing to being, from chasing to receiving, from hurting to healing. And something beautiful happens when you begin to love from that fullness. The same heart that once needed saving becomes a source of safety for others. You start to love people differently, not to fill yourself, but to reflect what's already overflowing within you. You love without expectation. You forgive without keeping score. You give without fear of depletion, because your supply no longer depends on others. It flows from God himself. This is why God sometimes allows heartbreak before restoration, because the heart that has never been emptied can never truly be filled. If he didn't let people disappoint you, you would have never turned to him for completion. If he didn't allow the silence, you would have never learned to hear his voice. The breaking wasn't punishment, it was preparation. It was God making space for himself where others once dwelled, and once his love enters, it changes everything it touches. You begin to realize that divine love doesn't compete, it completes. It teaches you that you can be whole even when alone, peaceful even in waiting, and joyful even without reason. The world told you that love was about being chosen, but God shows you that love is about being known. He doesn't choose you because he has to, he chooses you because he wants to. And when you finally believe that truth, all fear of rejection loses its grip. The emptiness that haunted you becomes a sacred place where God's love now lives. What was once loneliness becomes communion. What was once heartbreak becomes testimony. And you, once broken and weary, become a vessel of divine affection, radiating peace, compassion, and strength wherever you go. That's the power of God's restoration. He takes the parts of you that others overlooked and fills them with something eternal. You no longer love to be loved. You love because you are loved. You no longer chase validation. You walk in purpose. And in that quiet, holy transformation, you discover what it truly means to be whole. When God restores your heart, he doesn't bring you back to who you used to be. He transforms you into someone you were always meant to become. Pain has a way of revealing the difference between who you thought you were and who you truly are. The person who entered the storm is not the same person who walks out of it. You've been reshaped by what you endured, refined by what you survived, and awakened by what you lost. Restoration is not a return to your old self. It's a resurrection of your higher self, the one God designed before life wounded you. The trials that once seemed to break you were actually chiseling away the layers that didn't belong to you. The fear, the insecurity, the dependence on others for validation, all of that had to go. Every heartbreak peeled off another layer of illusion until only the truth remained, the strong, wise, spiritually grounded version of you. That's why you can't fit back into your old life anymore. You've outgrown the places and people that once felt like home, because God's restoration isn't about repair, it's about rebirth. You've been changed from the inside out. Before the breaking, you might have sought comfort in being understood. Now you've learned that not everyone can understand the language of transformation. You've learned to walk quietly with God, content to be misunderstood by people, because your peace no longer depends on their approval. The new you has discovered the strength in solitude, the beauty in boundaries, and the holiness in healing. You no longer chase explanations. You carry revelation. What hurt you before cannot touch you the same way now, because it no longer has permission to. There's something sacred about realizing that the storm was never meant to destroy you, but to reveal you. You thought you were losing everything, but you were actually shedding what was never meant to stay. The version of you that God is revealing is not timid, wounded, or waiting for others to see her worth. She knows her worth because she found it in him. You don't beg for peace anymore, you protect it. You don't run after love anymore, you radiate it. You don't explain your silence anymore, you honor it. Because restoration teaches you that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just rests. This new you carries a different kind of wisdom, the kind born from heartbreak and rebirth. You can now discern the difference between what feels right and what is right. You can feel when something disturbs your peace and walk away without guilt. You've learned that not every battle deserves your energy, and not every loss deserves your tears. You've become selective with your soul. That's not arrogance, it's alignment. You finally understand that protecting your peace is not selfish. It's spiritual stewardship. You are guarding the very space where God now dwells within you. God's restoration doesn't erase your past, it redeems it. The mistakes, the betrayals, the disappointments, all of it becomes holy ground. You can now look back without bitterness because you see purpose woven into every wound. The tears you cried watered the soil for your transformation. The rejection you faced redirected you to your destiny. The loneliness you endured became the classroom where you learned divine companionship. Every scar carries a story of how God met you in the breaking and rebuilt you with His own hands. That's why the new you doesn't resent the old you. She honors her, because without that pain, she would have never been born. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this restoration is how quietly it happens. There's no announcement, no spotlight, no applause. Just a gentle unfolding of grace. You start noticing peace in places where there used to be panic. You start hearing God's voice where there used to be noise. You begin to smile for no reason. Not because life is perfect, but because your spirit finally is. That's when you realize that restoration was never about fixing your circumstances. It was about fixing your perception. You now see through eyes that recognize blessings where there used to be burdens. You have become the living proof that broken doesn't mean over. You have become the evidence that pain can produce power, that silence can be sacred, that endings can be beginnings. God has rewritten your story, not with ink, but with grace. Every page that was once stained with sorrow is now filled with wisdom, peace, and divine confidence. You don't need to seek revenge, validation, or closure anymore, because what God restored inside you is greater than anything you lost outside you. So when you look in the mirror now, understand that you're seeing a miracle. You're not who you used to be, and that's the point. You are the masterpiece that was hidden beneath the wreckage. You are the healed version of the person who once wondered if healing was even possible. You are the testimony that time doesn't heal, God does. And as you walk forward into this new season, do so with quiet assurance. The version of you that emerged from the pain is the one God always had in mind. The restoration wasn't just about healing your heart, it was about revealing your soul. There comes a moment, after all the tears have fallen and the nights of questioning have passed, when your soul simply exhales. That moment is sacred. It's the quiet confirmation that the storm has done its work. You are no longer defined by what broke you, nor haunted by what left. You are defined by the one who stayed, who saw, and who healed. God's hand has been on your life the entire time, not only watching over you, but shaping you through every unseen struggle. The same God who allowed your heart to be shattered is the one who pieced it back together with wisdom, peace, and divine strength. What once felt like punishment now feels like preparation. What once felt like loss now feels like liberation. The waiting, the silence, the ache, it all had meaning. Through it all, God was not trying to destroy you. He was refining you into someone stronger, purer, and more spiritually awake than before. Now your heart no longer trembles under the weight of the past. It beats with purpose. The silence that once felt unbearable has become the sacred space where you hear God most clearly. You walk lighter, not because life is easier, but because you finally understand that you were never walking alone. Every scar you carry is a reminder that grace outlasted grief, that love was stronger than loss, and that divine peace is the greatest reward of endurance. You see, look and listen. The priest has watched. The priest is greater. You are not returning to what was. You are rising into what will be. Your story is no longer about survival. It's about resurrection. You are living proof that God restores, not to the way things were, but to the way they were always meant to be. So step forward with confidence and humility, for the same God who saw your silent hurt is now the one who will make your healing speak. Your heart has been restored, your spirit renewed, and your future redeemed. The pain had a purpose, and now so do you.